Okay, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. I see we've made some more people here. We've had some more people come in. Oh, for those of you who came in late, I was caught whistling in an evangelical. That means Protestant church in the Alps in Switzerland. Austria, and was screamed at by a very, very, very Calvinistic and a Lutheran church person saying you will not whistle in the church. But Barbara Young says whistling inside is bad. That would go with me very well. Okay, that makes sense. All right, having moved right along here. Good morning, Roy from Bellingham. And let's see what we've got here. Okay, we're going to start with some maps. Let me read the very first chapter of Karen Armstrong's, in her book, The Bible, a Biography. We're going to show some maps. Most people really know very little about Jesus. They scream a lot about Jesus, but they know very little about Jesus. And actually, most people don't really realize where he worked and lived. And it's not where most people think. And when I showed the map of my students this week, they were dumbfounded. They were absolutely dumbfounded. Her sentence is, we have no idea what Christianity would have been like if the Romans had not destroyed the temple. So let's begin before we even start talking about the Gospels. There are a couple of things I need to do. I need to show you all maps of where this stuff started. Then I need to pull up some groups that formed after Jesus died, because the Gospels are in many ways a direct result of the groups that started after Jesus died. So let me pull up some maps. I'm going to share the screen here. All right. That's not what we want. Okay, we want to go down here. I want to show you what most people have never really gotten. And let's see if I can put this on view. Zoom in at 200%. Let's see if that does better. All right. Here is the Galilee. And you're going to see this is where Jesus moved roughly when he was 30 years old. He moved from the Nazareth, where he grew up, and we don't know much or anything about his first 30 years. You can read all kinds of stuff, but reality is it's fiction. Nobody has a clue what he did his first 30 years. There is nothing written anywhere that's reliable. There's all kinds of stuff, but it's not reliable. Nobody knows. The suggestion is, since he was the eldest son and Joseph was a carpenter, that he learn carpentry because that's what you did. The suggestion is by most modern scholars is that he was born in Nazareth. When we get to the Gospels, the two birth narratives of how Jesus was born in Bethlehem simply do not make sense. And it's one of those things that surprises me because, like everybody else, I read the two birth narratives, paid no attention to one, followed the other, and didn't realize what I was reading. In Matthew's gospel, it has Joseph and Mary living in in Bethlehem. Jesus is born in Bethlehem in a house. Now, that's something none of you ever get. He was born in a house. But then you have in Luke writing that there was a worldwide census and they had to leave Nazareth and go to Bethlehem because Joseph was of the house and lineage of David and had to go to Bethlehem, which makes no sense. Here, I want to show you, this is Nazareth. Again, this is the Sea of Capernaum. The city of Capernaum where Jesus moved at the age of 30. This is the famous Sea of Galilee where people were fishing. But way, way down here is the area of Samaria. And you remember last class, we talked about people left behind. Remember that? And remember I said in 722, when the Assyrians came in and wiped out the northern kingdom of Israel, they left some people behind. And when I said they left some people behind, the Assyrians also brought in other people from the empire and deposited them in what was the northern kingdom of Israel. Those two groups will intermarry because the capital of northern Israel was Samaria. This is what it was called, Samaria, right here. And this is a group then of an admixture of those who were left behind in 722 and those who were forcibly brought in from other parts of the Assyrian Empire and dumped here. Over a period of time, they will intermarry. What they come up with in terms of religion is a hybrid Hebrew religion. This was considered absolutely awful, bad, name the adjectives, from the Jews in Judea. From the Jews in Judea. The Galilee was another problem for the Jews in Judea because half of the Galilee was pagan. A lot of the area here was given to legionnaires and others who had retired, and the Romans gave this area as property as a way of saying thank you. Making matters worse, along the coast were the ancient Philistine cities that still existed, Tyre and Sidon. They still existed, so you had Philistine culture along the coast, pagan culture here, and you've got Jewish culture, and you're going to find a lot of the Jews in the Galilee that were wealthy spoke Greek, dressed Greek, were a cultured Greek, not Jewish, not Hebrew. You're going to find that the people here that were Jewish had a different accent. Hello, you know that. They had a different accent, a different way of processing things. They were surrounded by pagans all the time. The Samaritans down here, nobody wanted to pay attention to way down here in Judea. See how far down Judea is? Do you see this? Judea is 60 miles away. Remember, folks, when we have the story about Bethlehem, which is down here, Bethlehem is 62 miles from Nazareth. So look at these stories about Mary going from Nazareth to Bethlehem when she's pregnant. Hello, really? You just look at the geography. Plus, the Samaritans wouldn't let them spend the night. The Samaritans were furious with the way they were treated. So nobody realizes this is where Jesus spent 99% of his life, his ministry, the way he thought, the way he talked. This was his home at the age of 30. He moved to Capernaum. Notice the Sea of Galilee is nowhere near Judea or Jerusalem. It's miles and miles away. You had to walk. Now, I always get somebody who says, well, Claus, why didn't they take a donkey? Let me put it this way. Do any of you have dogs? If you think dogs are expensive, imagine how much it cost to take care of a donkey 2,000 years ago. Having a donkey was a luxury item for a peasant or a mule. Forget horses. Forget horses. Today, horses are expensive. But if you think your dogs are expensive to take care of, imagine what a donkey would be like for a group of peasants. So you walked and you walked and you walked. And so you get Jesus, almost all of his ministry is here. You might find it interesting as a parenthesis that there is a huge debate. Matthew, Mark, and Luke say Jesus's ministry is 1 year. That's it. The Gospel of John, however, argues his ministry was 3 years. So they can't even agree. Christians in the very beginning can't even agree how long his ministry was. Let me be blunt. Nobody knows much about Jesus. As Karen Armstrong says, Jesus himself is an enigma. What we have are paste and cuts of some things he said, but huge debates about who and what he was. Now, that's just a reality. You can hear all kinds of preachers say, I know the mind of Christ. Hallelujah, Jesus has spoken to me, his spirit. Well, that's fine, they're free to say that. But I find it fascinating that people who know the mind of Christ wind up all over the place and are just as diverse or more diverse than the original followers who followed Jesus when he lived and after he died. This is the Galilee. Let me put it this way. Ron is living outside of London. The area where you live, Ron, I'm going to guess has a different accent than the kinds of people who speak in London. Your accent where you live is not the same accent in Manchester, and it's certainly not the main accent in Yorkshire, is it?
True.
And Ron has a Trinidadian accent.
On top of it. But I'm saying, Ron, you think...
But my wife is British, and yes, there's a difference between a London, what we call estuary, like the Thames estuary accent, and outside of London, like where we live.
Yeah, and then go north to Yorkshire. Holy mackerel. That's
exactly.
Like living in a different country.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you get Cockney.
Birmingham. Anything, any place other than you have different accents.
Right. And then you get a Cockney accent, which nobody understands. And then you cross the border into Scotland, and that is proof that God exists to have fun with language. I mean, if you've ever listened to somebody with a Scots burr, I mean, it's just, I mean, if you put somebody Cockney speaking to somebody with a Scots burr, you're going to get nowhere. You'll have to develop hand language. The reason I'm saying this, the people in Galilee had a different way of looking at things. There are intermixtures between peasants that were pagan, peasants that were Jews. The area was just a total mix, and you got the whole Phoenician thing going over here on the coast. Here you've got the Samaritans, who, by the way, Jesus used regularly as a foil to thoroughly annoy the people down here in Jerusalem, who thought they were the be-all and end-all. They were, if you will, the core of what Judaism is all. They had Jerusalem, and they had the temple and the priesthood. And this is, folks, where it is. This is the core of the universe, and this is heavily, heavily Jewish, very little pagan. The accent, the way of dress, the way of looking, this was it. Except it was heavily divided between the very wealthy Sadducees, those reformers, and they were reformers called Pharisees. The Pharisees were reformers. Then you got groups like the Essenes, who were mystics, if you will, kind of mystics and did things their own way. And then you got people who were ready to rebel and were fermenting rebellion all the time. So while this may have been all the same kind of idea, we are all Jewish, it was incredibly fragmented. Plus you had this area here, which was Jerusalem was on the side of a mountain. You drop over here and you see Jericho drops down dozens and dozens of feet into a flat area just above the Dead Sea, also known as the Dead Sea here, or the Salt Sea. Over here are the famous plains. And you'll notice over here, by the way, this still has Philistine kind of influence. It never really went away. So way up here in Nazareth and Galilee, people don't even, when you talk to people who study, you said, I'm a Christian. I said, you realize that Jesus was not down in Judea. He did not speak perfect Hebrew. He spoke in Aramaic, which was a patois, basically. And I'm sure his Hebrew had some kind of accent to it. And I said, the people in Judea really didn't like Jesus for a variety of reasons. Now, notice he didn't help matters by much, because what did he do? I don't know how many of you remember much about the Gospels, but he thoroughly poked a thumb in the eye of purists. He gave water to a woman, a Samaritan woman at the well. Remember that? There was a Samaritan woman at the well. He gave water. You don't give women water. A Samaritan? Are you out of your mind? All right. There were 10 lepers. I remember George McLeod preaching on this at Union Theological Seminary. The 10 lepers. Yes, George had a lace from his neck, a tartan, and this Scots outfit. I want to preach today about the 10 lepers. We're going, good God, what is this? And you remember, the only leper who turned back and gave thanks was a Samaritan. Then the other thing he did, which was to thoroughly poke a finger in your eye, was he talked about a poor man beaten on the road. Remember that? And a Levite passed by, a priest passed by. These are supposed to be the holy of the holies. And who was the one who took care of this poor man? A Samaritan. Yes. So he used the Samaritans regularly, which was an absolute affront. This absolutely ticked off the people and the purists in Jerusalem to no end. This makes perfectly sense for somebody from Galilee. So let me see if I can pull this up, by the way. Let's have some fun with this. Let's have some fun. Let's see if I can pull this up. If you can bear with me for a moment. Let me go to view. Racially, The area of the former northern kingdom of Israel, that's Galilee, consisted largely of pagan cities. And there were a couple of new Hebrew centers in Tiberias and Sepphoris, but it was all mixed. Geographically, the Galilee was separated by Judea by non-Jewish territory of Samaria. Politically, the Galilee had been under separate administration from Judea. Oh, you're going to love this. The Galilee offered better agriculture and fishing resources. Money, folks, that'll make you annoyed. You have the famous city of Jerusalem and the temple, but boy, you are poor compared to your pagan and Jewish neighbors in the Galilee. That's always annoying. Culturally, do you love this? Judeans despised their northern neighbors as country cousins, their lack of Jewish sophistication. Let us never, ever forget the importance of sophistication, the correct pronunciation of the language, the way in which one sartorially splendors themselves. There's certain perfumes and things that one adapts, the teeth, they're always white, etc., the way the hair is oiled, etc. Let's never forget that. Linguistically, Galileans spoke a distinct form of Aramaic. Yes, that makes it worse. And religiously, the Judea opinion of that the Galileans were lax in their observance. Oh, it was a mess. Yes. So if you get this, you're going to get this is a big, and most Christians don't get this at all. They think that Jewish was there, that Jesus was there, and there's no difference about where he lived, how he spoke, and with whom he worked. They really don't get the importance of the Samaritan woman at the well, the parable of the Good Samaritan, and the 10 lepers, the Samaritan who turned back. And down here is Judea, and here's Jerusalem, and way down here beyond that is the dusty, small village of Bethlehem. Okay, moving along, another map. I want to show you now. Let me go back here. Sorry about that. Let's go back here.
Duff,
Yes,
did you share that Galilee versus Judea with us already before?
a long, long time ago.
Okay, I'll have a look.
A long, long time. I can send it to everybody too. Let me get back to sharing.
No, please send it because I don't have it, Rev.
Okay, I'll send it. Okay.
Yeah, that looked interesting. That looked very interesting.
Okay. Now, yeah, I mean, explains, and people don't get this. You know, accents. Somebody's accent. Look, we may
It
do this.
explains a lot, really.
Yeah. Look, look, we have a friend, Ed Johnson, may his soul rest in peace, passed 2 weeks ago. And his sister is also a member of All Souls, and they're from Saugus. And they do not use the letter R. The letter R does not exist. You pack your car in New England. So Pam, his wife, goes with Cheryl to the undertakers, and Cheryl said his name is Edward Edward Cow. And Pam said his middle name is not Cow, it's Carl. And Cheryl said, that's what I said, Cow. She said, Cow is not Carl. Now, you know, there's sections of New York. I'm from New York. There are people who talk like that. You know that. And then you get two kinds of Southernese. Yow. Yes, I remember that from North Carolina. When growing up, my mother would go down to where she grew up. And I remember one time we had to stop, and that's long ago when they actually looked under your hood to see the oil and pump gas. Does anybody even remember that? I mean, that's in another century, literally. And this man comes up, and he said to my mother, yow. And I remember sitting in the back seat of the car saying, what language is that? My mother got very angry. She said, Kenneth, behave. And I thought, I don't understand what he's saying. And she spoke back something. I didn't understand what she was saying either. And then you get this whole kind of thing here, like, why I do declare, well, my, oh my, I do declare, we have here, Mr. Ron here from near the Cotswolds. Well, I say, Ron, how are you? I mean, get all this accent, and you know that right off the bat, and it marks you. And it does mark you. Now, here is a map of the Mediterranean during the time of Jesus. And I want to show this to you because my students never get this, and I'm sure you will. When Judea rebelled in 66, I keep on saying one of the issues, again, was money. You notice Jesus was not killed for what he did, was not executed for what he believed. Everybody forgets that. It said King of the Jews. There was the concern that he might lead a rebellion, which was no more on his agenda than the man in the moon. Let's hear it for fake news and gossip. There were those who said he'd make a great leader, but saying somebody to make a great leader does not mean they want to do it. He gets executed, and one of the reasons is 40 years before Jesus was born, the Parthians occupied Jerusalem. The Parthians were Rome's hated enemy here and here and over here. Right over here, you see this area here are the wheat fields of Egypt. In Jesus' time, Egypt supplied the hogshead share of wheat to the Mediterranean. Now, those of you remember the famous story of Antony and Cleopatra. Do you think anybody cared whether Antony and Cleopatra, as senior citizens, were having a massive affair? Do you think anybody cared about that? What they cared about is who had access to the wheat fields in Egypt. We're talking here like the modern day oil. Now look at the map. If this area right here, you've got to see this, everybody. If this area right here rebels, it is a very short 3-week, look at this, very short 3-week hop, skip, and a jump right across the Mediterranean, right into the wheat fields. This acts as a flank to Egypt. So if Egypt's going to be attacked, it gives the Navy a chance to put a blockade and protect the harbors, and it gives the legions in Egypt a chance to go here and defend. It's classic military strategy. If this is attacked, if Egypt is attacked here, you bring the legions here, set up a wall, you bring the Navy here, and you're all set to go. But this needs to be in your hands. This is your first line of defense. Now, having said that, let me put this up close. Now you see it. This is up close. It took 2 years for Rome to bring down the crack legions. Let's go through this again, because this will make sense to everybody. All right, look at this. To bring down the top legions. Now follow the map, everybody. You think of the movie The Gladiator. To bring down your best battle-tested legions, you're going to bring them down from Germania. The average legions is 6,000 men and another 4,000 cooks, followers, armorers, and whatever have you. To move 2 legions, you're going to have to go from here down to here and all the way over to here, over to here. It's going to take 2 years. To show you how important this is, the head of these legions is Vespasian. Vespasian will be called back in 69 to become the new emperor of Rome. That's how important this was. Who takes over this? His son, oh, come on. How did I forget this? His son, Titus. That's not right. Titus? Oh, how did I draw this? How am I drawing this a blank? That doesn't sound right. Yeah, Titus. Titus takes over, and Titus will lead the rest of the invasion. And here's what happens. So let me go back here, and everybody take a look at this. Take a look at this right now. The legions, you're going to lay the legions arrive here. Do you see my cursor right here? They arrive in the Galilee. Most of the Galilee is not in rebellion. So they arrive in a safe area. Vespasian and his son. Titus doesn't sound right. Why am I getting this backwards? I can't remember Vespasian's son. I'm drawing a blank this morning. They arrive here. Now look what happens. They very, very slowly, they arrive in 68. They very, very slowly move down from the Galilee into northern Judea. At this point, everybody, follow my cursor. The legions here begin to move across the Sinai into the southern part of Judea. Everybody follow me? The legions here move here and stop. The legions here move down and stop, and they pacify each village and town. And what you do is the legions would pull up outside and they ask if you would acknowledge the emperor as your god and burn incense in his name. If you did not, they gave you a chance to surrender and do it again. And if you did not surrender, you got wiped out. Now, I asked my students, if you were a believer in God, I hope you'll enjoy this, everybody. Let me stop for a moment. Let me stop the share for a moment. I asked my students, I said, look, you're in a village. Imagine Holly and AJ there are in a village. And I said, okay, you now have 5,000 in this village, and you've got kind of a picket fence around it, maybe half a wall. And the legions pull up and they say, okay, Titus, I was right. Titus was right. Titus was correct. That's the one who will take over after Vespasian. All right. So I said to Holly and AJ, all right, do you surrender and do you acknowledge the emperor as your god? So I said to my students, what are you going to do? And the guys always raise their hand and say, we're going to defend, we're going to stick up for our beliefs in God. I said, so do you have, by the way, any training in warfare? And the guy said, what does that mean? I said, do you have any training in warfare? You've got 2 legions out in front of you who are battle tested. What are you going to do? And I said, you're going to get not 100 feet out of the gate, and you're going to look like a hedgehog, because they're not even going to attack you. They're going to let loose with 1,000 or 2,000 arrows, and you're going to be like done before you get over a minute. I said, what you need is some good theology. And my students say, what do you mean by that? I said, if your theology is smart, you're going to say, what would God want us to do? If God loves us, does God want us to be slaughtered over something stupid like this? No. So God says, do what you have to do. I love you anyway. So if you've got a good God, you lie, you burn incense, we love the emperor. And you said, God, I hope you keep your word, because if you don't, I'm getting a new God and I'm going God shopping. And my student said, that's a good theology. We never thought about that. If your God is a God of love, what kind of God would ask that? Think about that. Do some theology. Some surrendered, most did not. Josephus was in this mess and lived another day. Okay, let's go back then. Let's go back to the screen share. All right, let's go back to the screen share. So what happens is you see Jerusalem here. Let's see if I can pull this up with a view again. Let's see if I can get the view. Let's zoom to 200%. And I'll show you what happens to the famous Jerusalem. Titus will arrive finally in Jerusalem. His father Vespasian is now the new emperor. He arrives in Jerusalem about 70. The other legions arrive below Jerusalem. It doesn't take long for the legions here from Egypt right here, and the legions from Europe right here. And what do you have? This is known as a hammer and an anvil. The legions here, right here, surround this half. The legions right here surround this half. And after a 3 to 4 week siege, the walls are breached. The Romans pour in, and it is a bloodbath. Josephus reports that eyewitnesses count roughly 12,000 people are brought out of the city. It is destroyed. The citizens, what who are left, are destroyed and killed. All that's left of the famous temple is the wall, which is what we still have today. That's it. In this debacle, 1 million Jews or so died. The economy was wrecked. Judaism will change forever. And so, by the way, this is not my theory, by the way. There's a famous German called Adolf von Harnack, who argued what happened in this death spiral in Judea. It just so happens in 68, 69, and 70, the overwhelming majority of Jewish Christians were also in Judea, and they all died. They were pacifists. They did not believe in rebellion. The Protestants who sing "Onward Christian Soldiers" obviously know nothing about the first century Jewish Christians. They were no more interested in warfare or violence than the man in the moon. The idea of the Crusades, God wills it, is you go slaughtering everybody in Jerusalem for 3 days in the name of God, so your sins will be forgiven, is so totally foreign to early Christianity, it's not even funny. So you get just about all of Jewish Christianity is slaughtered as well. And that means from 70 on, what's left of Christianity will change, because the Jesus story will be told now outside of Jerusalem, outside of Judea and the Galilee. The story will be now told from the followers of Paul and others here, over here in Alexandria, and along northern Africa. It will be told, the Jesus story after 70 will be told in little house churches that Paul starts, but it will be told here and here and here. You're going to hear of Ephesus and Philadelphia. You're going to be told here. You're going to hear of Thessalonica way up in here. Paul's letter to the Thessalonians is the earliest writing we have in the Christian New Testament. Most people are not aware of that. There is a small Jewish congregation in Rome that sees Jesus as the Messiah. These are not Roman Catholic or Orthodox by any stretch of the imagination. They are Jewish Christians who see Jesus as the Messiah. Some Gentiles will join. Through here, you're going to see Paul beginning to work with non-Jews, and you're going to find Paul has a problem. Jews that are now in the Galilee are going to be up here in Antioch, giving the Jesus story, and they will conflict with Paul's understanding of the Jesus story. Let me just take a quick, if you can, digression. Paul will become a convert to the Jesus story because of a religious experience on the road to Damascus. And I tell this story often because it shows how people get a view of Jesus, of Paul in Sunday school that does not match with what happened in other scriptures in the New Testament, which are conveniently neglected. It says that Paul was in Antioch and Peter was there, and Peter at this point is a very old man. Think of Ron now as being 85. Ron, you're 85.
Not far off.
That's right. Now imagine Ron with jowls. Look at this. I should talk. Jowls and everything. I should talk. I'm not that far from 85. Joke's on me. All right. Peter is old and a hero, a great grandfather type. And he's sitting with some Gentiles at supper in Antioch. And Paul comes in, a new convert. And in religion, there's nothing worse than a new convert. I don't care what the religion is. And he sees Peter sitting there, and then some Jews come in, these are Jews who see themselves as followers of Jesus and see Jesus as the Messiah. And so Peter gets up. Peter gets up and goes and joins the Jews he knows coming in from Jerusalem and sits with them. At this point, Paul, full of himself and self-righteous with indignation, says, "See, you're a hypocrite. As soon as the Jews come in, you leave the Gentiles and go sit with the Jews. You can't stay with them and let's loose with this tirade." There is dead silence as people are unbelievably offended that this newcomer who used to persecute them is now yelling at Peter, who is doing nothing more than sharing hello with one group, and another group comes in, goes over and says hello to them, which is what all of us do when people come in. You're sitting at a place at a picnic, you're with a group and a new group comes in, you go over and say hello to them. It's no big deal. But Paul, in his self-righteous indignation, sees this and yells and calls Peter out. You'll notice from this point on, Paul is not welcome anywhere with established Jewish congregations in the northern part of Judea and in the Galilee. The whole rest of his ministry is outside of the area. Follow his maps. It's not down here. It's all over here, 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 and here. He is not welcome. Finally, at one point, he's causing such trouble that James, Jesus's brother, and Peter and John call him to Jerusalem for a famous council. And he goes because he realizes that he has to go because you're going to argue against Jesus' brother. We think not. Now, this is all happening just before the rebellion. He is called to the council, we're guessing roughly 62, 63, somewhere there. The rebellion starts in 68. Maybe a little earlier than that, because James is killed in the 60s as well, before the rebellion. So you just need to know that what people get in Sunday school is not exactly what's going on, and you need to take a look at maps. Now, having said that, I need to pull up another thing as we get going here. And this becomes important. I think you may have seen this begin, but I want you to take a look at some groups that form after Jesus died, before the Gospels as you and I know them are written. And I think it's very, very important that you check this out. Number one, look at the Galilee. Jesus is really, if you will, kind of like a divine hero, almost, if you will, a Hercules. Think of the pagan influence in the Galilee. Now, you know, Jesus had, right? Jesus had a human mother. The question is, was his birth special or not? And so this whole idea, maybe he's like a Hercules, starts floating around. But down in Jerusalem, he has to be of the house and lineage of David, because all messiahs must be of the house and lineage of David. Now, a lot of people today think, well, how could he possibly be of the house and lineage of David? Did any of you ever pay any attention to the number of wives David had? There is, when I was teaching the Hebrew Bible at Miami-Dade College, I had the students read the following, and they didn't get this. David was not yet the king. Saul was still the king. And so David was still a non-king, very influential. But listen to this passage. Sons were born to David at Hebron. His firstborn was Amnon of Ahinoam of Jezreel. She was a pagan. The second was Chileab of Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. That was also a pagan. These are non-Jews, by the way, non-Hebrews. Carmel is up in Phoenician territory. The third, Absalom, son of Maacah, daughter of King Talmai of Geshur, also a pagan. The fourth, Adonijah, son of Haggith. The fifth, Sheptiah, son of Abital. And the sixth, I can't pronounce these, of David's wife, Eglah. Do you see how many wives there are? That's just before he becomes king. All of these boys will have other wives in the plural, and you can see already you're going to get a big, huge family of tons of sons who will have lots of women like their father did. Right here, he had 6 wives. 6. We didn't even get to Bathsheba and others. And then you remember his famous son Solomon, who had 700 wives and concubines, if the number is correct. All of these will have children upon children, so it's no big deal to say you're of the house and lineage of David. Most people don't get that. They think this is something special. All you have to look at the record of how many wives these people had and how many kids they had, and they all have kids, and you get it. Now, if this doesn't make sense, my wife's family has 9 brothers and sisters. I remember when my mother-in-law turned 80, and the kids threw a birthday party for her. There were 160 people there. Nothing but family. Now, I kept on saying to Maria, this is not a family, this is a tribe. You don't understand the difference between a tribe and a family. This is a small tribe. So it's not a big deal, but this would be very important in Jerusalem. This is where Judaism is. This is the temple. You have to have of the house and lineage of David. You have to. In the Galilee, they could care less. They're looking at a hero, Hercules. Very different points of view from the beginning. Now, I want you to see right here, number 4, there were those who immediately want to say, prove to us that he's the Messiah. We want proof, 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 proof. And of course, that leads to fables and exaggerations. The famous story turning water into wine. Now, you know, there are jokes that have been made about since that day. But this group will form, go down here to number 10, the Johannine group, which ultimately produces the Gospel of John. All you have to do, and we'll do this later on, is look at the beginning of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and then read the beginning of John, and you're talking about different planets, different galaxies, different language, I mean, totally different language and thought systems. I don't know if you knew this, Mark was the first gospel written. Matthew and Luke borrow heavily from him. They are totally intertwined, Mark coming first. John is out in its own, whatever it is. This group here, you might find interesting. This is a group of people, males, who took seriously what Jesus said. The idea with this group, pay attention now, because this is Unitarian Christianity. The idea is what Jesus said was important. You're not interested in births. The birth stories come later, by the way. I don't know if you knew that. Paul knows no such thing of a virgin birth. He said Jesus was born according to the flesh. That means a regular birth. That's a Jewish statement, Paul being Jewish. Jesus doesn't know of any virgin births. They come later. The virgin birth stories in Matthew, Luke, and by the way, there are only 2 virgin births in the entire New Testament. And when you put them side by side, like my students had to, they got very upset and said, these are not the same stories. They're not even close. I said, I know, because in the United States, you combine them both and you think there was just one story. They're totally different. The players are different. Matthew has Jesus born in a house. It says so. I will show you that. Luke, there's a manger because there's no room for them in the inn. Hello, either you're born in a manger with a bunch of animals or you're born in a house. It's not the same. Okay. This group here goes looking for what Jesus said. And the idea is you're getting somebody who's a teacher. And you go and you find that the teachings are what give you strength. There is here no theology about bodies rising from the dead, no ideas of angels flying all over the place rescuing you, no ideas of heavenly hosts, trumpet blasting and things like that. No, they want to hear what Jesus said and remember it. That's what they want to do. They want to hear what he had to say and remember it. So you're going to see 2 very things. You can write this down. We'll get to this again. Matthew 5, 6, and 7 is a cut and paste. You'll see these are a series of short sayings. They're lumped all together. It's a cut and paste. You can see it very quickly. One saying after the other after the other. You'll see that, a replica of that, in chapter 6 of Luke. One is called the Sermon on the Mount. The other is called the Sermon on the Plain. Chapter 5, 6, and 7 of Matthew. And you're going to get chapter 6 of Luke. Cut and paste sayings. The idea is, what did he say? That's what we need to listen to. By the way, I have a great deal of fun with Matthew and the sayings. And I guess I should be repentant of this, but I'm not. When I hear students being very, very judgmental or others, I always say, do y'all really know Jesus? And I said, because if you really know Jesus, you must have heard of the Sermon on the Mount. Don't be rude, Claus. Of course I know Jesus. I have testified, and I know the Sermon on the Mount. And I said, well, obviously you haven't practiced it very much. And then I get usually some kind of violent comment. I said, I'm just saying to you, Jesus said, since you said you follow Jesus, judge not lest you be judged. Why do you see a speck in somebody else's eye when you've got a log and a beam in your own? That's from the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus' words, not mine. So you're going to get then some very, very interesting sayings, and it's like the same thing as Siddhartha, those of you who are Buddhists. Siddhartha said, keep it simple. Have you ever read any books on Buddhism? Ha! Let me pull up for you to show you why everybody gets stuck in the same thing. let me just pull up for you something very, very quickly, if I can. Let us show you some conservative Buddhism, mainstream Buddhism. Then you get down Theravada Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism. Does this look simple to everybody? That's why when somebody says to me, I'm a Buddhist, I say the same thing as when they say they're a Christian. What kind? You know, it's funny. If you say you're a Christian, you get nailed for that, but you Buddhists get a pass. I don't give them a pass. When somebody says they're Buddhist, what kind? Look at all of this. They say, well, they're Mahayana. I said, fine, but what kind of Mahayana? All I'm trying to say, you've got the same thing everywhere. You get a teacher that says something, and then what happens? Siddhartha said, keep it simple. Did that look simple to anybody? You said this, Jesus said, don't judge. And what do you get? You get judgmental Christianity all over the place. I mean, seriously, it's enough to drive you nuts. So Jesus' sayings were meant to, consider the lilies of the field. Why do you get all upset about what you wear, what you this and what you that? Keep it simple. You'll notice a lot of basic Jesus teachings, a lot of basic Sufi, a lot of basic Mahayana is very, very simple. Some very simple Taoism. There's some linkages. But then you get Homo sapiens involved and it goes amok. But when you actually take a look at the sayings of Jesus, they are very simple, made for who? It's the other thing people don't get. Jesus did not preach to college students. He used a language that you could picture. Now, people don't get this. His language was pictures. Who's his audience? Now, you know the first thing you do when you start discussing something, who's the audience? His audience are not hoity-toity toffs from London or Atlanta or New York or wherever else. They're not toffs from Jerusalem or Sepphoris. No, they are hard-working, smelly, unwashed peasants who have nothing to look forward to. They live, they don't get a birth certificate, they die, nobody cares, and they work a very hard life and they don't live long. The average life expectancy in Jesus' lifetime was 22 to 25. So when Jesus said, you are the salt of the earth, I don't think anybody here gets really what the impact of that was. Salt was the big deal in the time of Jesus. There was a famous roadway called the Salarium. It was the salt on the way to salt mines. Salt was used in medicine. It was used to preserve food. It was a life thing. Salt, we don't think anything, we just don't eat too much salt. Knock it off with the salt. We don't get an idea of 2,000 years ago, the essentialness of salt. So when Jesus says to a bunch of people who have no hope, you are the salt of the earth, we don't get the impact of that. When he says, you are the light of the world, why would you put your light under a bushel basket? We don't get that. Now, I'm not a fan of Jesse Jackson, but he was trying to say that when he was talking to Black people. You are somebody. You count. He was trying to echo the idea, you are the light of the world. We don't get that because it's mundane. But back then, when nobody gives you any hope, and so we don't get that. And those people he spoke to were in the Galilee. According to the Gospels, he made one trip to, yes, absolutely. Salary comes from salt, and they paid Roman soldiers in salt too, the great Salarium. So these are the kinds of things we don't get. So if you get his being surrounded by peasants, and he'll attract some Gentiles too, some pagans, who will find they like what he has to say. His teachings make sense. So we'll stop there, but I hope I gave you a quick introduction to this. Galilee is not Judea. The Samaritans got a bad rap. The same thing we said last time. Remember the same thing? We said that people got left behind are never taken seriously. The group that got left behind when the Jews were deported by the Assyrians, those left behind. In 586, those left behind were not deported in Babylon. And then remember, when those who left Babylon, they left a whole ton of people behind, and those are taken for granted too. So all of these groups come into play. Yeah, Ezra came back and shamed them, and so did Nehemiah. So I'm just saying, by the way, what we're going to continue with this too is not only taking a look at the list, and I will send you the thing about Galilee versus Judea. We're going to take a look then at more of the groups that formed after Jesus died, because these will be the backgrounds that give us the beginning of the Gospels, as you know them. The Gospels are not identical. They have different points of view because they are faith statements from different communities. These are not historical documents written down with, on day X this happened, on day Y. No, these are statements of faith and beliefs. And just as we have three Unitarian Universalist congregations that are as different as night and day. Welcome to Judaism 101. We've got UU Miami, we've got River of Grass, and we've got All Souls. Three very, very, very different congregations. Very, very different types of worship. Very, very different approaches to things. Not one is right, not one is wrong. They're very, very different. Yes, I know that, Maureen. That's why I put it up there. I'm one step ahead of you. But I'm just saying they're very, very different points of view. So you're going to see this already reflected in the Gospels. And so you're going to see this. So that's what we're going to look at, those groups. And then we'll get back to Karen Armstrong. But when the temple goes down, it all becomes a mess for everybody. And it will irrevocably, okay, I'm sorry, that's my bias. I think my bias is, I think we made a huge mistake, and there's nothing could have been done about it. There's nothing for it, I think is the English phrase. There's nothing for it. The Jewish sense in the beginning that Jesus was a teacher. When the temple falls and Jewish Christians are killed in that huge mess of the rebellion, that means that whole emphasis on Jesus as a rabbi and teacher will then get lost by death, because overwhelmingly, though, that will be left will be non-Jews. These will be groups that heard the Jesus story after he died, and they will be in Alexandria. They'll be what we now call Turkey, will be now called Greece. And these are not getting and don't understand and don't even begin to get the Jewishness of Jesus. And so now you're going to get whole different theologies. And rather than having a simple bread and cup and a meal, you get holy mysteries, incense, all kinds of stuff that had nothing to do with a simple cup of and bread and how do you gather simply. We lost all of it. My master's thesis, by the way, was on the history of those who tried to keep the Jewish theology alive for the first 2.5 centuries of Christianity. That's why I'm into all of this. And that's why, yes, and there's another rebellion too, which was the final straw. We'll get to that too, Danny. Thank you. We'll get to that too. So you get people like me who try to ground Christianity in Jesus and his teachings, and without all of the incense and all the rest of that. And, I have no problem with the other, but I don't relate to the other. I guess my more rabbinic side comes out very, very easily. And from Galilee, not from Judea. So anyway, I just shared my own personal biases, and that's what my master's thesis was written on. The professor wanted me to go on and get my doctorate, my PhD, and finish the 3 last chapters. So for the PhD and publish it. But I wanted to go in the ministry. and a PhD would be useless to me. I needed a practical doctorate. I needed something I could take with me practically so I could learn practice the theory and practice of working with parishioners. So I got a professional doctorate at Boston University. I did not get the PhD, and I don't regret it. The PhD would not have been helpful to me in parish. Does that make sense to anybody? I hope I'm not just whistling in the wind, but I need something that was practical. Never, ever did I expect I was going to be an academic. And as it turns out, my English career, the chair said, you're not being an academic, but having all the degrees is brilliant because we're tired of academics. You bring a totally different way of looking at things, and the kids need some relief. And my present chairman said, you bring a different way of doing classwork. You actually like students. One of my colleagues said to me, you treat your damn classes like they're secular parishes. You know everything about your students. He says, you don't get it. This is academics. And I kept on going, teaching is more than academics. Teaching is how you relate to students, how you care for them. Appropriately, I might add, appropriately. But these are people. So anyway, what you're seeing is nothing more than a continuation of what I've been trying to do in seminary, is take a look at the Jewish side and try to anchor that as much as possible. All right, everybody, thank you very much. I will send you this. You got to see that thing from Judea to Galilee. I mean, that is like an eye opener. My students were flabbergasted that they never got this. And I said, relax, you're not the only ones. And when they saw maps, they said, holy mackerel, that makes all the, we never knew that. Maps are very helpful. Just let me say, if I had money, I would invent a map. Now imagine this, there would be the whole side of a wall in a classroom. It is one level geography, because our students do not get geography or topography at all, right? You got that. Then I would have on top of that, economics. Where's all the trading? Where is the money? Then I would have tribes, where the tribes are, and then religion. Does that make sense? You could superimpose one on top of the other. Would that be fabulous? Would that be a cool way to teach? You could see a whole wall, right? You can see a whole wall and superimpose in color how that blends. Okay, now before we go, one last thing. Michelle wants to come on board with us as an affiliated minister. She teaches. She has a PhD taught. So the class will probably be able to continue when I'm gone. So that's nice to know. She loves teaching. She will be preaching on the 27th, and we vote for her on Palm Sunday at 10:45. So Bobby Vance, yo, pickleball. Do you play pickleball? Oh no.
I have you know that senior citizen comment for pickleball was not appreciated. And I invite everybody to come to Flushing Meadows. The U.S. Tennis Center will be having a pickleball tournament in New York City. Trust me, not senior citizens.
You know, I never liked you anyway. All right, remember everybody, if you can show up here, Maureen, we need to have her, we need to have your vote to have her join us. That gives us base. Maureen, what a ministry team as we move on into a new era of All Souls. Pickleball began in Seattle on the coast, if I remember correctly. All right, so any last comments? Let me say goodbye to Holly and AJ, to Pat in a very remote part of Florida, a small area called Tampa, very remote out in the Everglades. John is up in Port Orange. Doug is in a small part of Munich, a small part of Muncie or something, in a small part outside of Rothenburg on Tauber.
München.
Yes, small area. Oh, Salzburg is Saltfort. Huh. All right. Ron is outside of London. Roy is in, we got Ray, Roy, and Ron today. Ray, Roy, and Ron, all in a row, too. Look at this. We got Roy out in Bellingham, Ray in Washington Heights, Bobby and his wife in Kissimmee, Maureen down near the farmland. Pat, his sister is up in, good morning, Pat. Her sister up in Forest Hills. Tony
Good
Lee.
morning.
Tony Lee in Miami Lakes, Amelia Schweitzer in Ormond Beach, Nanette in Brooklyn, Connecticut, Barbara Young in South Miami, Franzella, who is my neighbor across the way and has been following us, and Danny in Washington, in Forest Hills too. Thank you all very, very much. I will send you the other stuff. We need also, by the way, to talk about how there was not a split between Judaism and Christianity. That's another thing that was turned out to be all wrong. The two intermingle in spite of all of the toughs trying to separate them. They will intermingle and intermingle. And take a look at All Souls. It is a complete intermingling of Jewish and non-Jewish thought, ideas all over the place. So it continues. All right. Plus, we have some resident Armenians and a Sufi to keep us on our toes. Now, that's the way it should be. Isn't that cool? All right, everybody. I see you soon. Peace be with you. Shalom. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
I'll record this. Oh, let me
Bye,
stop
thank
recording.
you. Thank you again.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.